I can't sell my rental property. I have to pay too much in taxes. Now, it's not for sale, but thanks for asking. This is William Smith with William Smith Luxury Group at Coldwell Banker Realty in Carmel, California, and I'm going to share with you some ideas that have been around for a long time that are used often, and now that people have a lot of equity in their income properties, then they have the opportunity to use the IRS tax deferred exchange. It's a 1031 tax deferred exchange. What is 1031? Well, that's the code in the IRS code. And currently it allows the sellers to sell their property and, meeting certain requirements, use that equity without having a tax liability to buy another property. So there are lots of rules. IRS is very specific about what those rules are. And you obviously are going to need to get professional help, and your title company or your realtor can help you find the right accommodator to make sure you comply with all this. And there are plenty of accommodators out there. If you have a need for a 1031 exchange, put in your comments below that you'd like me to contact you, and I'll get you some of the best accommodators I've dealt with for now over 3 decades. So with that, we're going to go into a little bit of what a 1031 exchange can do for you to have you sell your real estate that is not your personal residence. Because there are really only 2 types of real estate. And you think, well, there's a lot more than just 2 types of real estate. But as far as IRS is concerned, there are 2 types of real estate. The one that you live in and everything else. So the laws that pertain to your personal residence are completely different than a 1031 exchange. So we're not going to talk about your personal residence, but let's say you have a little house. It's a rental. Maybe it was your first purchase. That was your residence. And now you've been renting it out for 12 years. And all of a sudden you've got a lot of equity in it. And you think, gosh, that house is worth a lot of money, but I can only get so much rent for it. Wouldn't it be better if I could trade it into something that I could get more rent for? Here in the Monterey Peninsula, you can sell your single family residence and buy a fourplex, maybe someplace else in a different market, for about the same cost, but the rent is going to be 2 or 3 times more. So what we're talking about there is capitalization rate. That'll be another segment that we'll talk about in the future. But the 1031 exchange is available to have you sell one property and then buy another property. Having an accommodator allows you not to have a taxable event by putting all the money into the accommodator's account. You never get any of it, and then you apply it to your next purchase. Now, can you get some of it? I want to do 1031 exchange, but I could use $50,000 to remodel my kitchen in my current residence. Can I do that? Yes, you can. That's called boot. You've heard the expression, we'll have $50,000 to boot. Well, boot is, in IRS terms, a taxable event. So if you take that $50,000 out of the escrow, you can do that, but that will be a tax liability that you have to pay capital gains on. Again, make sure that your CPA and make sure that your accommodator are informed of everything that you do, because if you do not do a 1031 exchange properly, it will not be accepted by IRS if you're audited, and that is something that you have to make sure to pay attention to when and if you ever have to defend your exchange. So a 1031 exchange, usually the accommodator will give you exactly what the rules are as far as identifying the next property. But the basic rules are that you have the close of escrow date that starts the timeline for your 1031 exchange, and then you have 45 days to identify your next purchase. Then once you've identified the next purchase, you have up to 180 days to execute the close of escrow on that purchase. So what does that mean? Well, In a difficult market, like we just have experienced for the last 2 years, you probably didn't want to wait the full 45 days to identify a property. You probably wanted to have a property right away so that you do your investigations to find out that there are no hidden costs that you weren't expecting, so that you have time to cancel that escrow and find another property. As the market changes, you have a little bit more leeway because you'll have sellers that'll be more accommodating to you when it comes time for identifying and being able to take your time to close. But if you miss a deadline, very important you know that if 45 days goes by and you have not identified a property, or IRS under certain circumstances gives you up to 3 properties, there are some regulations that you'll have to talk to your accommodator about, because there's the 3 property rule, the 5 property rule, there's the 200,000 or 200% rule with 95% of the properties having to close. There are lots of rules above my pay grade as a real estate broker to give tax advice. So you talk to your CPA and you talk to your accommodator in order to make sure that you follow the rules of the 1031. But there are lots of ways to do a 1031 exchange, and it makes sense for you to use that extra equity in your home as long as you follow the rules of the 1031 exchange. Now, what happens if you see the perfect property, you want to buy it, but you haven't sold yours yet? Well, there was a gray area called a reverse exchange, but it now has become more black and white, and there are rules that you can follow where you can sell your property and then you can buy another property. One reason it's not very often used is because it's very cash intensive. Your accommodator will explain the details of a reverse exchange, and not everybody can qualify, but just figure it's going to take a lot of cash. If you have a lot of cash to do it, then you can accomplish a 1031 exchange. A reverse 1031 exchange a lot easier. So those are things that you need to make sure that you know the rules, but it is a way for you to take all of your equity in your first property, your first leg of the property, and exchange it into the second leg. If you decide not to do a 1031 exchange, but you want to sell that rental property and just pay the taxes, then you can just take the rest of the cash and buy the next property. And there's some strategies that would make sense, because capital gains right now is lower than it might be 2 years from now or whenever, because you're not avoiding the taxes, you're delaying the taxes. So at some point, when you sell the last property or your estate liquidates the property, your 1031 exchange becomes due, because each time you purchase the property, it lowers the basis of the next property, and some people prefer not having that happen. So there is a reason for not doing a 1031 exchange in an instant like that. So that's another hint. I look forward to explaining more of what goes on with the California Association of Realtors Residential Purchase Agreement. I'm looking forward to answering your questions. Please contact us if you have any more. Thank you very much.